Hey, John Gilroy here. If you Google generative AI, you get 1 billion results. Today, AI in search for federal applications. Hit the music, Manny.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Today, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and search in the federal government. And I thought we'd bring in a company that maybe you not have heard of before, because I hadn't heard about it. It's called Yext, Y-E-X-T. That's a pretty easy website to find. I've been talking to a lot of people about artificial intelligence and search lately, and the Yext came up about 2 or 3 times. I figured, let's drag in old Justin Fessler and find out what he has to say about that. And that's our guest, Justin Fessler. He's a senior director, U.S. Federal, U.S. Public Sector Federal, and Canada for a company called YEXT. So, Justin, you walk into the 7-Eleven, you get a Slurpee, and people say, who do you work for? What do you say? What's Yext?
John, it's really funny you say that because it happens all the time. What is
I'll
Yext?
bet.
And everyone who has said that has probably used us in the past and has not even known it. If you've ever gone to Google and asked, where's the closest post office to me? You've used Yext. We manage 31,000 of those post office locations at our platform and our knowledge graph, and we make that information available not just to Google, but across the World Wide Web. So as a citizen, you go and you ask that question on Google, Bing, Alexa, Apple Maps, Siri, etc. You get the right answer, the same answer, because it's powered by us.
Oh, wait a cotton picking minute here. Wait, come on now. I got an average IQ. So does Google own you? Are you separate from Google? How's this all organized?
Yeah, actually, Google is one of our biggest partners, actually. Our headquarters is right across the street from theirs in New York City in the Meatpacking District. But we have agreements in place with over 200 publishers, not just Google, like I said. And it's all about consistency of information. What I talked about a moment ago is what we call listings, right? It's making information about locations available across the web. But that's not where we stop. We provide really the end-to-end citizen experience when they're looking for information, whether it's on the web or on an agency website. We want to make sure that that information about the agency is trusted, it's accurate, and it's available. So when you and I as citizens go and ask questions, which we do, we don't just do keyword search anymore. We get the right information that's being powered through that government service and government agency out to the World Wide Web.
Well, here it is, spring 2024. Guess what everyone's doing? Trying to file the taxes. I am sure that people go to the IRS and ask specific questions about certain deductions, no deductions. Would that be an application for something that Yext could handle?
It absolutely is. We've had conversations with the IRS recently on that exact topic, making information more readily available through irs.gov. They're not a customer of ours yet. I just want to be clear on that. They're actually going through a competitive analysis here in the short term, which is going to be awesome. But that's spot on, the types of questions that we can answer. And there's different ways to provide answers, right? Directly through the agency website or through the Googles of the world. The good thing is the IRS is doing some level of search engine optimization. So their information is ranking through Google. But when you get to their page, and no flaws on the IRS, they're doing a great job with their content strategy. It's just a lot of content. Us, and this is the typical government problem, whether it's the IRS or DHS or wherever, it's a lot of pages and a lot of words that we have to sit down, read, consume, and decipher what makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yext tries to solve those problems by doing the reading and providing direct answers from information that already exists on those government domains. Now, I'm not even talking about generative AI. I know we'll get to that in a minute, but search at its core is meant to answer questions when it comes to our platform.
I did 730 interviews for a company in town here called Federal News Network. And one of my critiques of the company is that their search is terrible. I mean, you can type then, and you might type in ham sandwich and wind up with, Martian rover or something, I mean, and so I think what happens is that a citizen may show up at a website, could be FEMA. It could be NIH. It could be at NIH looking for a grant. It could be tax information. And they don't want to have the experience that I had at Federal News Network of typing in one thing, wait a minute, I had nothing to do with this. I mean, you've seen it happen, Justin, haven't you?
multitude of times. And John, are you looking for a job? Because that's exactly the type of things that we're trying to solve, and in all candor, like I said, we're a publicly traded company, but we're nascent when it comes to public sector. We're supporting some very large organizations like Samsung. We are the search on their support website, like Bucknell University. We're the search on their main page to make access to their resources and their curriculum and courses more easier to find, but also more easier to consume and engage with.
No, wait a minute. I had a guest in a year ago called Elastic. Now, don't they do the same thing?
Yeah, actually, I'm very familiar with Elastic. I've been around the search space for about 15 years. Elastic nowadays, they're very focused on security and observability from my perspective, and search really comes on the back end. We look at search completely in the forefront because that's what citizens touch every day. They're used to the Google-like experience because that's where I typically go to start my journey when I'm looking for something is Google. That's the first thing on my phone. Or if I ask Siri or Alexa, right, they're going to point me to Google resources. So where we differentiate is alignment with that Google-like experience. We're actually built on top of a knowledge graph. The knowledge graph leverages a lot of AI, machine learning, natural language processing models, large language models, right? So we can, first and foremost, answer the question directly because we understand the context, the substance, the intent of that query when it comes in. And if the agency, that the source content doesn't have a direct answer, then we start looking at leveraging generative AI models to, number one, not point out to the World Wide Web. We want to contain the information specifically to those government resources, right? We put guardrails on it. So we avoid that external bias, the noise, the hallucinations when the Gen AI model really confidently gives you a wrong answer, right? We only point to those government resources to make sure that the citizens, the people that are asking those questions about benefits and services and resources are getting answers coming from the government, not third parties.
So, Justin, I've done a lot of interviews, and sometimes I get lost in the weeds. I'm going to get really into some details and everything else. And let's say we're up in Northwest DC, sitting at a coffee shop, and we have a whole hour conversation about search. And the guy sits at a table next to us and goes, "You're the only two guys in town interested in this." However, we can counter and say, "Well, no, actually, there's an executive order that says, it's a priority here to help citizens find stuff." And so we're just not two guys in the coffee shop talking about this. Is really a federal priority, this whole improved search, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Biden has focused a lot of his attention, not just on search. Search has been definitely a part of it, but CX in general, right? And the way that we look at search is personalization, right? We want to touch the citizens and interface with the citizens, how they like to interface, right? People ask questions differently, but are trying to get to the same source of information, same resource. The answers need to be able to flex towards the questions that are coming in. So I think more of an alignment with the 21st Century Idea Act and the EO, again, around CX and user experience is really important. And Yext is a component of that, right? We're not going to solve all challenges for everyone, but I think what we do is put a really good front end on gaining access to those information resources because they already exist. They're just very, very difficult to navigate to and navigate through.
Well, I've done a lot of interviews. I talk about NIST and CMMC and acronym, and the military guys love acronyms, go back and forth and back and forth. I'm using an acronym that Govies never use. This acronym is CSAT. Nothing to do with getting into college, but CSAT. Tell me about the CSAT. What this got to do with federal sites? I can't connect the dots here.
Yeah, the customer satisfaction in this case, the citizen satisfaction is really low when it comes to engagement on these federal websites. And honestly, let's take the IRS again as an example. When you Google, how do I file my taxes? What pops up first? H&R Block, right? Right. So people are used to finding information from these third-party resources. When they get to the government website, John, you pointed out earlier, the search is really, really poor, right? Therefore, they bounce back to the third parties like the Googles of the world to find information. What Yext provides is the capability to very directly, again, answer questions on their websites. We've seen in cases going back to Samsung where the net promoter score increased 40%. The customer satisfaction increased over 30% just by implementing a contextual knowledge-based search that understands the users, provides tier 0, tier 1, tier 2 level support, right? Not only does that provide really, really good self-service and call deflection, but you can also provide that same capability, by the way, in the hands of the customer service reps. So if someone does call the contact center, the customer service agents can ask a quick question, get resources to them quicker, answer their caller quicker, and overall drive down contact center costs. Yeah. So we're kind of a game changer from the front end to the back end individuals as well.
Tomorrow night I'll be in the classroom and I teach, of course, in digital strategy, and net promoter score is part of the course. We talk about that, but most govies don't even think about that. But that's just a ability to recommend a website. And so if someone goes to justinshoes.com, they've got a high net promoter score. If they say, yeah, I'd go back or recommend to someone else, that's what a net promoter score is. That right?
Exactly. Yep. And it's all around how engaging that experience is, how likely you are to use that experience again.
Let's go from Justin Shoes to the NIH. Okay. So the NIH is sitting on all kinds of stuff. I mean, I can't imagine how much information is sitting on. And Google really doesn't have access to it because it really can't access a lot of things that are behind some security doors here. And so what your company offers is that you can go to NIH, knock on the door and say, hey, looky here. We've got this product that can find out and categorize information so it can be of service to people who are trying to access it. And this is where the phrase that pays comes in, generative AI. Is that where the phrase that pays comes in?
I think, again, going back to what I said earlier, generative AI is fantastic. It's not the end-all be-all. It's not going to solve all problems. To your point, NIH has a wealth of information. Oh. You've got National Library of Medicine, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. There's a lot of research that comes out of those organizations. FDA, right? Where you've got drug trials, right? There's a lot of information that exists, the output of that research. Those documents that are in the National Library, those citations, right? There's a lot of content that can be pulled out of those resources that doesn't need generative AI. It's about answering the question at first. And then if an answer doesn't exist, that's where the generative AI comes in. There's a lot of information in NIH writ large. CDC, again, another great example on how people interface. COVID, right? When COVID came out, CDC had to get moving, mobilize pretty quickly to make information available to the public. Well, the state of New Jersey actually came to Yext and we built an application for them. Their COVID hub, now their information hub, was built in 4 days and pushed out to production to answer questions about what's going to happen to us, right? There's a pandemic. What do I do? A lot happened in that just search experience before we even get to Gen AI. So questions come in, they start answering questions about precautionary measures. What vaccines should I take? Where do I go? 6 months later, 12 months later, what happens? The questions start evolving, right? The questions start coming in around, when can my child go back to school? Will prom be held, right? So what Yext did there, it actually informed the content team, the strategy teams, on the types of information that was coming in, so they can better create new information to service the citizens. Without that type of feedback loop being captured by our backend analytics, they wouldn't have had that proactive ability to answer more questions that were coming in. They would be stuck in that keyword search approach. And again, now comes Gen AI, right? Gen AI can do a lot of different things. It can help create those pieces of information that then get pushed out to the public. It can also, on the front end, when a user asks a question, I've said this a couple of times, if the answer doesn't exist, allow the Gen AI to be pointed to your data, not all data, your data. So when a specific question about your organization, the protocols that you have, your policies, the services you offer come in, it answers based on your ground truth, right? Not the ground truth of OpenAI pointed to everything. So that's how we look at Gen AI when it comes to government organizations. It's building that level of trust and that level of truth, both with the agency and their level of trust back out to the citizen.
I got tons more questions, but there are people who are listening to this and want to get more information. I was at your website this morning, yext.com. You can find it. And there is a guide there specifically for this audience. I mean, this is great. And it's called The Public Sector's CDO's Guide to AI-Driven Citizen Experiences. And so if you're listening to this and it's 6 months down the road and it's hot outside, you can go to Yext and download this and get all kinds of questions asked. And it sets you up for asking the right questions about generative AI and just figuring out exactly, what is a large, does my organization have a large language model? Do I have to come up with one, or is that just a library? Or so what is the difference between a library or a data set and a large language model? Is it a threshold? Is it an approach? So what is the difference there?
This is my opinion, so I'll say that, not Yext, but they may follow suit. a library powers a large language model, right? The more data you have, the more vectors you have that can point to different relationships amongst data, the more powerful your LLM large language model is going to be, right? The difference in the performance between GPT-4 versus GPT-3.5 is night and day. I don't know the exact difference, but the scale and the vectors that 4 has in comparison to 3.5 is very, very different and more powerful. And the more data you have, like I said, the more powerful your LLM is going to be by understanding more context, relationships. And again, if we get specific into verticals of information, NIH specific or DHS specific, for example, it's going to get even smarter to be able to answer those domain specific questions that come in.
I heard a talk last week by a guy named Captain Jesse Black from the Naval Research Institute. And he talked about AI, they're using it for everything. But the hang up is this little thing, minor little thing called trust. And he says he wants his people to be able to comprehend and trust the results. And also, by the way, Justin, what's the reasoning behind these decisions? So there's some kind of, you can call it transparency, you can call it citations. I mean, there's got to be part of this discussion. I mean, and this must be what people ask about all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the concept of quote unquote black box, right? How do we trust the efficacy that these models are giving us trustworthy results that we can rely on, that we can push out? And honestly, this goes back to not human in the loop, but human on the loop, right? The Gen AI model is not supposed to be spitting out results directly to the end user. It's supposed to be providing more proactive approaches to the service workers on answering their questions, right? They can be more proactive to then deliver better responses and services out to the citizens. So it's really, I think, making sure that there's a seamless interface between the LLM and the end user, but also putting those guardrails in place, right? The challenge with applications like OpenAI when it comes to things like trust, it's connected to everything. There's a lot of third-party resource, third-party information that are feeding those models. By putting guardrails on it and by pointing the LLM specifically to your data, the government resources, it will build trust. And again, it's not meant to push information directly out to those end user citizens, but it is meant to push information out and make the federal employees more efficient, to do their jobs quicker. And if the Gen AI model pushes something out that's good, that federal employee doesn't have to write something themselves. They can say, we approve this, or we push it through our approval processes, and it takes months of writing, consulting, consolidating, down to hours or weeks.
So where do you start? Just try and define the large language models? Is that the first step?
Actually, I'll put another hook in for Yext. We have a free online gamified learning platform. It's called Hitchhikers. You can create a free sandbox today, John, and you can start taking courses in Yext. You can see where the different components of the platform will fit into the organization. You can create really, really flexible dynamic search experiences. And it's all point and click, drag and drop configuration. You don't need any coding background to get started. So that's a great place to get started as Hitchhikers.
So would your company be classified as it's not a search company, it's more of a digital experience or digital, a platform for digital experience? And I keep thinking search, but it's really not just search, is it?
No, we're not just search. That's a great point. And we do consider ourselves a digital experience company. We've had a digital presence and we've provided digital experiences for about 17 years now on the web for a multitude of large public organizations. And we're really starting to get into federal to make the federal information more readily available, not just on the government websites, but wherever someone goes through those digital channels.
I have a presentation called SEO for the CEO. And I talk about the origins of Google and how search works and everything else. And traditionally, Justin would type in tennis racket. And then he'd get in some ads, and below the ads, he'd say John's tennis rackets, Ralph's tennis, Sally's tennis rackets. You could go to a website. And so the way I understand generative AI is that if Justin would type in, what is a tennis racket, it may have an answer for that and then say, oh, you might want to go to this, but here's the answer. It's a 15 by 18, or whatever it happens to be. And so what generative does, I'm trying to define it myself, because it abstracts the question and gives the answer first, and then secondarily maybe the website. And so if someone's looking for the NIH and funding certain research in tennis elbow, maybe it wouldn't refer to the, but it might say, well, this is in. So is that what generative? It has more of a text-based result or answers the question.
Actually, the first example you gave is how we're powering some search experiences without even Gen AI.
Huh.
And I think the tennis example was a great one because you can say, show me tennis rackets, but maybe you want to say, show me the best tennis racket for clay courts, right? Those are the types of questions that we answer. And one of our customers is powering a very similar search experience to that, where once you put that in, it'll pull up images and recommend ones that are better for different experiences, different courts, different playing styles, etc. Again, this is just an example, but then you can additionally refine it. Indoor court, outdoor court, and the results will dynamically modify. And that again doesn't include any Gen AI. Yeah.
So how is this evaluated? Is it evaluated by the CSAT score? Is it evaluated by CIO of the agency deciding good or bad, or how is citizen experience evaluated?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of government agencies are still trying to figure that out, right? The way that we look at it is obviously things like Net Promoter Score, CSAT score, but from a government perspective, I think it's really about engagement and how people interface with information. Are they getting good answers? Are they not getting good answers? Yext actually captures that information. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Really simplistic example. But that helps inform the teams that are actually administering the search experience and the content. Is their content good? Is it outdated? Are there multiple conflicting copies which are creating conflicting answers, which are, in the case of existing websites, conflicting links? Which link is better than the other? That shouldn't even be a consideration anymore. It should be link abstracted. Here's your answer. Here's a link under that supports that answer and where it actually came from.
I mean, if I'm a federal leader and I have an agency and I see the directive, executive order to do this, well, guess what? I'm going to be evaluated on that. I have to comply with that. So I'm sure there's going to be an audit or some kind of a questionnaire, some kind of a ranking.
That's right.
In regards to customer experience. And I think that's really is it just subjective experience? Is there some way to quantify? You talk about Net Promoter Score and CSAT scores. Is there a criteria that maybe the government's developing and don't tell me NIST comes up with NIST 800.9.6.2 and it's a 500-page, 5-volume set on exactly. Maybe at NIST they're smart up there. They may come up with this, huh?
Well, I think following suit of some of these larger organizations like the Samsungs of the world, right, with customer satisfaction, why not just take some of those, adopt them into the agencies, have OMB create, I don't know if it's OMB, someone in the White House create some standards around them, and then each agency is able to adapt them based on what they offer, right? No. USCIS is going to have a very different way that they approach their customers than FEMA is, all within the same DHS umbrella, right? But by adopting these frameworks around CSAT, Net Promoter Score, how you interface with them, not just on your website, not just on the Googles, at your field offices, right? Which, by the way, again, going back to the postal example, you get to a post office because you ask Yext through Google how you get there, right? We can start from the beginning and making sure they can get where they need to go, speak with someone. That's how they like to engage. If they don't, they want to go on the web, allow that same information to be available, whether they walk in that door or whether they walk in your digital front door.
I have a friend whose son is a stand-up comedian. We talk about techniques all the time. And in stand-up comedy, there's a technique called a callback. So you start off with a joke about Youngstown, then you do your set at the end. Well, we talked about Youngstown and blah, blah, blah. And so in this interview, we start off talking about the post office, talk about that. And so when you look at where customer experience can be improved the most, do you have like 100 websites and there's a score you have each one and go, well, actually, we're going to focus on this agency because they're blah, blah, or that agency, or obviously there's some agencies that aren't outward facing. And so is there a priority list for you to work or does the GAO come and say, okay, your Net Promoter Score is 6. You got to get up to 30 by the 18th.
No, Justin's perspective is any agency that interfaces with the public that has a really poor search. I just go to their website and I use it myself.
Yep.
If they have a poor search, I pick up the phone and I contact someone. And I would say 95% of our government websites need help.
True. Yeah. And by the way, that's true for many commercial sites too. Just Absolutely. Because you're Justin Shoes doesn't mean your site's optimized, doesn't mean it has good user experience. In fact, John Gilroy shoes can come up tomorrow and just crush another commercial company if they're not sensitive to that. And they can get crushed, can't they? You see it all the time in the commercial world.
Yep.
Yeah. So you can't look at that. Okay, crystal ball time to look into the future. Tell me where Yext is going to be in 4 or 5 years. And I guess your company's been around since 2006. A lot of commercial experience. Trying to take this commercial experience, apply it to the federal government. So where do you see it all happening?
Goodness, we're going hopefully in the next couple of months towards FedRAMP. So we're not going to just be looking at extranet websites. We're going to be looking at intranet websites, allowing government employees to really pull their enterprise resources together. I'll do one more quick plug. We've got probably one of the most robust integration platforms on the market. I say frameworks on the market. It's included in the platform. We have built native connectors, which are supported for the platforms like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Adobe, WordPress, Microsoft, etc. Very robust REST APIs and a very robust software development toolkit. So we can really get data from anywhere, but we can also sit inside of those experiences and be the search within Salesforce or within ServiceNow. So we want to really power the intranet experience for the federal government and allow them to ask questions and deliver better experiences out to the citizens.
Yeah, I always wonder if it's REST or RESTful API. Anyway, it's just a funny little thing in the back of my mind. Well, unfortunately, Justin, we're running out of time here. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Justin Fessler, Senior Director, U.S. Federal, U.S. Public Sector, and Canada. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.